Oh, howdy, folks. Desert Boy here. Now, I was just thinking as a follow-up to the little travel intro I gave you there, asking about, what exactly is the desert? And there's a lot of different ways to define that. I think, everybody kind of has their own experience with that. There's certain elements I think most of us usually think of what comes to mind. We think of hot temperatures. We think of the arid area, kind of like in the later part of the video. But we don't always think of things like, lakes or trees and forests and things like that can be part of it. A lot of times you could be down on a valley floor, but you go up in the mountains and there's forests. Sometimes there's different kinds of animals up there. In some states there's bighorn sheep. In other ones there's elk or deer. And there's trees. There's pine trees and different kinds of trees, maybe some cedar trees. Some areas have a little more lower vegetation, more like junipers almost and things like that. So anyway, just kind of, what is the desert? Well, the desert's full of a lot of very interesting things. There's some great monuments and things out in a lot of part of the desert. I think people think of places like the Grand Canyon, but there's also places like Bryce Canyon, Zion National Park, Moab. There's all these different places to go to that are out in the desert. And there's a lot of smaller state parks to go to, like around places like Las Vegas. There's Valley of Fire. If you go to Sedona, they also have a lot of red rock there, like Red Rock Canyon. So I think most people, though, they think of it more as like, more like Death Valley, it's just super hot and miserable. But there are some really interesting places to visit. And I hope with this channel we'll get a chance to go and see some of those. Maybe this year I might make a trip up to Wyoming, quite possibly up to Idaho. Because although I'm focusing primarily on more of the desert, kind of western states like Nevada and Utah and Arizona, I'm also focusing more on kind of the Mountain West, which I think of as including, Idaho and Montana and places like potentially New Mexico. So those are all very interesting places. There's a lot of good stuff to see there. So when you get ready to travel, one of the things you want to do always is make sure you're prepared. As you know, you do with the research you can. Maybe try to call ahead, get some information, go online. Talk to other people, look at photos, make sure you've got appropriate things like water with you. If you're going to go, say, like most people, you get ready to go, you want to have resources like this, right? You might have something like a map, right? Or if you're going to go out and kind of out in the wilderness areas, you always want to make sure people know where you're going. They have maps at BLM that you can get. They're relatively inexpensive. They're pretty detailed. They have a lot of topographical information on them, but you still want to make sure people know where you're going. A lot of places may not have cell phone coverage, so you need perhaps a CB radio or some kind of satellite radio or emergency locator. Some people use those, especially people that go off up in the mountains using, quad runners or off-road kind of vehicles. There are special highways in some parts of some states that are like off-road highways where you can drive those, but people use those a lot of times just in case they had an emergency or something like that. Always want to make sure you got plenty of water, first aid supplies. I know in my car I try to carry like a backpack that has a certain amount of supplies in it and so forth in case I needed that. Some people nowadays have solar type chargers for their phones, or even or a storage battery for that. You also want to know, what about the area? Well, besides the towns and or whatever park you're going to or monument or whatever, you also want to know about things like wildlife. What kind of wildlife is there? Is there, like this one, maybe there's bighorn sheep, like I said. You might want to know about the birds. They have ones about different states about birds. Or sometimes people want to know about things, and I meant to bring a little geode out here. If you don't know what a geode is, it looks like a rock, but when you break it open, it's like it's got this whole crystalline structure inside, which is a result of how it cooled when it was formed. It's beautiful. You might have a book like this, a book that has something to do with stones. or other things that you're expecting to experience while you're out there. If you're going through northern Arizona, for example, there's a petrified forest, right? It's trees, but they're stone, right? Also, another thing always good to know about is things like that are hazards to you, right? Certain kinds of hazards, in the desert, right? We have different kinds of things that are things that bite you, things that could sting, different kinds of insects. Most people have those kind of things, but they seem to be pretty prevalent in the desert. There's a type of snake, for example, in northern Arizona, and it bleeds over into some of the other Mojave Desert areas, even California, a little bit of southern Nevada, called I think it's called Crotalus scutellus, which is the Mojave green rattlesnake. It's not as large as the big diamondbacks like people are used to. But one of the things unusual about it, not only does it have hemotoxin, but it has neurotoxin too. So not only do you get your blood's getting poisoned and so forth, it also has agents that can affect your nervous system. So it's just good to know about things like that. And you always want to, make sure you know to get to a medical facility or something if you do encounter things like that. Some people like to go to mining towns or old ghost towns. Always remember, you go to mining towns, sometimes there's old mines or there's old mine shafts around. You got to really watch for all that stuff. As you're walking around too, a lot of times in the desert or in a forest, something like this, walking stick can be real handy. I know as I've gotten older, my footing may not be as sure as it was. This is a good way to test where you're at. Sometimes things, might slide a little more than you think. Plus, it's kind of handy in case you come across something that you don't expect. And it's kind of helpful. That's something I find I always take with us when we go to parks and stuff like that. So, kind of plan your trip. But once again, the desert is a great place. You have beautiful sunsets, beautiful sunrises at times. Yeah, it could be pretty warm, but you can also see some pretty interesting creatures sometimes that you don't expect. And of course, if you need other ways to protect yourself besides, bringing something like that, make sure you're prepared because there are other predators sometimes. There's things like, coyotes and mountain lions and things. So usually they won't bother you. I mean, usually the animals like that, they're not necessarily looking to hunt you, but they may come across you and they may be hungry. So you want to have a way to keep yourself and your family safe and be prepared for that. If you go up into the northwest, of course, you got bigger types of things besides things that bite and sting. Like they got big things like bears, right? Or you got things like a moose, right? These are huge creatures, and you want to understand that environment when you're around that. And a lot of times the deserts, and just like being in a forest, sometimes it's very easy for things to all look kind of the same if you're driving over a bunch of roads and hills and all that. So if you're off-road or something, you better really know where you're at. It's good to have Navi and all that, but once again, you may not have cell type things, so having a good paper map, understanding how to use a compass and things like that can be real helpful. Other than that, traveling around the desert can be great. A lot of different things to see. Some people might think of Las Vegas when they think of the desert. Some people might think of Phoenix. Once again, like I said, some people might think of the Grand Canyon. So I just want to give an opportunity to say hi and travel safely and make sure you're prepared. And just go out there, and it's good to enjoy life and have adventures. Just make sure you have safe adventures and take plenty of pictures and movies a lot of times, and then you'll have memories too. So have a great day. Be safe out there. This is Desert Boy. Thank you.